Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another Restored to More podcast. Today, we have the pleasure of interviewing Stacey Sadler.
Stacey Sadler is an EMDR certified therapist and has undergone extensive training in treating complex trauma and dissociative disorders. She's also trained in emotional transformation therapy and utilizes this skill to help with emotional regulation and intrusive thoughts and triggers. Stacey is a certified clinical partner specialist through the Association of Partners of Sex Addicts Trauma Specialists, in which she utilizes the multidimensional partner trauma model to treat clients who are suffering from betrayal trauma. She utilizes the attachment theory from How We Love to help couples understand how wounds from their past impact their relationships today and develop healthy communication patterns employing listening, empathy, and validation. Welcome, Stacey.
Thank you. So glad to be here with you guys.
We are honored. I feel like we kind of stole you. I was Rosie McKinney on the Fight for Love podcast is incredible. Such great friends. And when I heard you on the podcast, I was like, oh, that was so good. We need it on ours.
Oh, I love it. It's great. Share the love, right?
Yes, it was so good.
One of the things I love, Stacey, is how, first of all, we were talking off air for a bit, and just to see your passion come through, your heart for women and for men and for couples. And that's something we share with you, as a passion to help couples learn how to be empathetic, learn how to validate their feelings. And I'm pumped because I feel like today we are getting some really gold stuff of what you're talking about, some amazing wisdom. And before we go there, can we just share with our audience a little bit of your story and how you got to doing what you're doing today?
Wow. Yeah. I'm not sure. God did it, not me. No, I had some effort. I put in some effort, but just went from being a mama to saying, okay, my life is not where I want it to be necessarily. I had a husband that was addicted to prescription drugs, and life was hard. It was difficult. And I learned about boundaries, and I started setting boundaries, and I started learning that he wasn't heeding my boundaries. And so we were getting further and further apart, and ended up in eventually being infidelity. And so in the meantime, I had been going back to school to get my master's degree. And I didn't know if I was going to be a counselor. I just thought I might have it in my back pocket, maybe just even figure out what the heck was going on with me and my life is. And so before you know it, I was a counselor, and I was looking at the abuse cycle and things like that. And I was like, uh-oh, I'm a victim and I don't want to be a victim. So I finally got the courage to end things. About 9 years ago,
Wow.
and then been working with betrayal trauma because people said that fits your story.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, does it? And people New Life Ministries tends to put a microphone in my hand and say, go talk. And I'm like, okay. So my story's gotten out there before I was even ready to tell it, but um just have I get these women, I get betrayal trauma, and I so wanted my marriage to work out. So I'm passionate about it. Was a tough thing for me to step off into marriage counseling because I was like, oh, I don't even know what I'm doing. But now that I'm in it and loving it and doing it, just to see couples get it is so much redemption that didn't happen for me, but I can see happen in them, and it's precious.
I love that. You know, what's amazing is we talk a lot about this, that, obviously our story was linked very much betrayal trauma to pornography, to sexual behaviors that we obviously want to have in my life, but that project in my marriage. But I would be curious to find out, do you see a lot of couples who suffer from betrayal from other kinds of addictions because the spouse is still neglected and is treated the same way as somebody who maybe suffers from sexual addiction and things like that?
Yes, absolutely. I have a cutting edge idea that says, when I learned and I was trained through ABSATs and I heard what they were doing, I was like, oh, yeah, I agree. Because I had been gaslit, lied to, manipulated. And he was having an affair with a chemical and a drug dealer and everything else. And it felt so much like I did not know who I was living with, but I couldn't put the pieces together.
Yeah.
My 12-step program, which was Al-Anon, told me to just stay in your own lane. Don't ask about his program. You don't get a full disclosure. You don't get to talk about the impact of it.
Wow.
And I was like, hold up. What about the relationship?
Yeah.
What about the relationship? And there is nothing in 12-step programs that is for the relationship. And
Yeah.
I think that is sorely, sorely missing, because when you agree, when you covenant to come together and trust and tell each other, deception erodes every bit of connection that's there. And so this was no exception. So yeah, I think anytime someone's involved with an addiction that takes over there, where there's lying and deceit,
Yeah.
there's absolutely betrayal.
And I think, what's hard about that is that we talk about, even after somebody starts progressing towards freedom, whether it be from uh, unwanted sexual behavior, from a drug, and they find freedom, it still takes time for the partner of the betrayal to start healing and
Mhm.
start taking to steps. Because I think for so long, Charity had to lead our family. She had to kind of just tie up her bootstraps and say, okay, I'm going to be dad and mom to our kiddos. I'm going to take care of this. It's so sad for me to reflect on that, but that's the reality. The reality is I was just trying to keep my job, trying to stay afloat, trying to keep a perspective of people that I was a good guy, that I had it going on. And behind closed doors, I was a mess. And so I wasn't able to be there for Charity or for my kids as much. I just was trying to hide my addiction. And I was curious if you could talk about that for a little bit, of how it takes time. Even though I'm getting better, there has to be some time there to get back and to heal.
Clinton, that is so validating for me.
Mm.
I mean, like, it brings tears to my eyes, because I just got finished writing a book on single parenting. It's the manuscript is at the publisher right now. And my first line is, I was a single parent before I was a single parent.
Mm.
And he came back from rehab, and he's full of virility and, hey baby, here I am, and now I can perform, and let's have sex. And I'm like, are you kidding me? We went through bankruptcy and this and that, and I was angry, and I was holding resentments, and there were no amends to me or anything. And I had been doing both parts of the marriage for so long. And in my program, they could look at me and say, well, you're holding bitterness, or my church, but how easy would it have been to come in and say, "Hey, hold her heart for a little bit. Hold some space for her for a little bit." And even if we were had been engaged in a process, had it taken a year or 2 or 3 or 4, at least there would be a process.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But unfortunately, he wasn't willing to do that process.
Yeah.
But it does take time. It does take time,
Mm.
for sure.
Thanks for sharing that. And that was awesome. That was really that was a great just question. Um, something that you even said a couple like prayer before, a little bit of what we just talked about, was it reminded me of, ever since we've shared our story and now our ministry, and we're helping couples will come to us with not even, like Clinton was saying, sexual addiction or pornography, and they're maybe struggling with, like you had said, even with your own story, is addiction with drugs, or even depression. And I just want to hit on this because I never in my wildest dreams knew that the tools that we were going to learn on our own recovery journey and then together as a couple was going to be tools that we could then share with other couples who haven't even gone through our specific story of betrayal, trauma, and sexual addiction. Like, we have friends right now that are coming to us and saying, hey, this is our story. And at first I was like, well, like, how can we help them? But then when we started talking to them and sharing with them things that we had learned, we realized that they too have had triggers, and they too have not set up healthy boundaries, and they too, the wife doesn't feel safe. So how do you feel safe again? And how do we share these big emotions with each other? And it's just so important for couples to realize, like, even though it is really painful to go through healing and recovery, it's so worth it. It's
Mm.
so worth it.
Worth it. Yes, it is blood, sweat, and tears, but it is worth it. It
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
When one person has an issue, a problem, it affects the other.
Hmm.
There is the nervous systems of two people are highly connected. And so when one's dealing with something, my husband was depressed our first year of marriage, and I had never seen anything like that. I was like, I don't know what to do with it. I actually had, because my dad had it, but I didn't know. but I knew it scared me and I didn't know anything about it. And I wasn't even a part of it. So I felt distanced from him from the very beginning. But, validation's validation. Like you said, boundaries are boundaries. There are so many tools that in what we do in betrayal trauma that help a wide variety of people, I think.
So much of what you talk about, Stacey, is validation, amongst other things. And I just would love for you to share about this, because you are somebody who's doing a ton of work on the validation process. You take couples through a 6-week course after they've learned about it, maybe in your e-course for 8 days. And there's so many tools out there that you're creating. And I love that. Can you just start off? Let's say I'm somebody who doesn't even know, what does that mean to validate? What does that mean? What does that even mean? What does that look like in a relationship?
Well, validation is, when someone says something, one person says something, and the other person just stares at them or looks at him and says, no, this person is over here going, okay, what I just said, it's not being received or even considered as valid.
Hmm.
And this person starts feeling kind of crazy and very unheard and very apart, separate from this person. So you can validate anything. Someone can say the most random thing under the sun, and you can say just a simple statement. Well, yeah, that makes sense that you would want to not work and lay around all day. Working's hard. Even if you don't agree with it, you can validate it. And so when we're in relationship, it's important that you hold space for someone and try to understand where they're coming from. You don't maybe not even understand it fully and completely, or definitely don't even agree with it, but you can always validate it.
Okay, wait, that's
That
crazy.
was so hard for me.
That's crazy, because that's hard for everybody. That's not just you. That's hard for me to have something you say that I don't even agree with, and I'm like,
Yes.
that's stupid. You know what I mean? Like, that's the opposite of validation, right? But the idea is that I'm trying to go and put myself in your shoes, think about it through your perspective. How does somebody start validating when we don't agree with what they're saying or their decision making? How do we do that?
It's not easy, and that's why I've created this process. It's called the acrostic validate, VALADILIDATE. But the very first step of it is recognizing vulnerability.
Hmm.
And usually with couples in recovery, they have to learn really quick when they start getting taught, messed up from the very beginning. And you can just see it. It's like, oh, we're off to the races. We're going to do the trauma dance or the core pattern. We call it a lot of different things. What do y'all call it? Do y'all call it anything?
We just call
Crazy
it,
cycle.
yeah, the circle. We do the circle, the crazy cycle, all those. Yep.
Yeah. And so when you recognize that's happening, the first thing is to recognize that the other person is being vulnerable. So the woman comes to the man and goes, you blew up my life. And all he hears is, oh, I'm in trouble. She's
Oh yeah.
mad. And so the first step of recognizing vulnerability is to go, hey, she's needing something from me right now. Underneath all that, there is something she's needing from me. And what is it that I'm feeling when she says, you blew up my life? I'm probably feeling, what would you be feeling, Clinton?
Oh, I'd be feeling like I'm not good enough. I'd be feeling a failure.
Yeah.
I would automatically be feeling going back to resentment that I ruined our relationship, and that again I feel like inadequate, insecure, afraid.
And that's what that first step is about, is saying, wow, this is coming up from in me and it's keeping me from hearing her.
Yep.
And when I recognize that, I can decide to put my feelings aside, as stepping into healing or stepping into wanting the coupleship, and say, okay, let me be here for her. Let me jump into being here for her and hearing what she's got to say. And that's a big step. Like you said, that's why it works slow with couples in recovery, because shame is just so huge. It's just so huge. But that's where it begins.
So true. So good. We have a lot of couples, and even just our own story. I mean, the wife wants to be free with her emotions. The wife wants to, because she's in so much pain. I remember being in so much pain and just being like, well, I have a right to be angry. I have a right to be mad at you, to cuss at you, whatever it is, and to explode. Yet what happened in the beginning was then that would just again go in the crazy cycle, and it's like Clinton's a turtle and his head's, you know, when I respond that way, it's like yes. Exactly. And he's gone because there's so much shame, and he'd be like, this is all my fault, and you know, blah blah blah. And a lot of couples that, you know, reach out to us is like, what do I do? You know, like she's mad at me, she's going through something, and it could even be a trigger, you know, maybe something, you know, they're at the beach and all of a sudden they're having a great time, they're on date day, and boom, sees a bathing suit, she's triggered, she's pissed off, and she's mad that she even has to be triggered on a date night at the beach, can't even be at the beach, you know, with her own husband, and now all of a sudden he's feeling shame and guilt, and it's like, well, that happens all the time.
We've both been sabotaged in that moment.
I
Right.
think
And that's how couples will look at each other and say, are you triggered? You know, I'm triggered. Are you triggered? And to start, you know, taking it apart and seeing what's really going on at that moment.
I think what's really hard too, Stacey, is that it was really hard for me to get in touch with my feelings. Like, honestly, the fact that you're like, what would you be feeling right there? I was like, oh my gosh, okay, feelings, let's go there real quick. What I feel, you know, and that's not easy to do. And I think what was really hard in the beginning of our relationship was that I finally was able to put a name to the feelings. And then I came to Charity and I voiced it, and she would get angry. She would get defensive. She would be mad. And here I was for the first time in my life, putting my feelings out there, being so vulnerable. And she would respond with anger and frustration. And I would just tell her, like, you have no idea how hard this is for me to voice to you what I'm feeling. I'm not medicating. I'm not running away. And you're pushing me away and you're shaming me. Like, I'm done. I'm done talking about what I'm feeling. And it just was so hard to keep showing up after she would be negative. What do you tell couples? Like, listen, Stacey, I tried that. It don't work. What do you tell somebody who says that?
I say, you know, she doesn't have to hold the bag for you. So you've got to go to your guys.
Yes.
That's where you get all your empathy and your support, because she is in no position to do that because she's been betrayed.
Come on. That's it. And I think a lot of guys are frustrated about that, but they have to go to somebody else.
Yes, because they want to go to their wives. Down the line, it can happen with the wife. But you got to be there over and over and over and over again before she decides to participate, come back online. And I'll tell you in a little bit about a webinar that I offer. And it's crazy what happens in that webinar, because it's a couple in recovery and they're 3 or 4 years in, and they've been in individual counseling, marriage counseling. And he says to her, he does it first, because we're always going to have the betrayer do it first, right? And then they turn tables and ask her, are you ready? And she had to stop and calm herself a few times. And I would suggest that for the men too, when they get flooded with emotion, to say, hold up, I really want to hear you, babe. But let me just, because I want to be defensive. Just hang on. Let me just get in this headspace and let's try again. Let's do a do-over. But anyway, he says to her, I really feel like you were controlling and manipulative. And I'm ready for her to blow a gasket,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And so she takes a big deep breath, and I said, okay, first of all, can you talk? I feel controlled and manipulated versus you, you know, the I versus the you. And so he says it that way. And she says, okay, tell me about that. And the truth was, in this video, the issue was that she said, I'm sick and you can go on and go out of town to be with your family. It's fine. You choose. Now, they both knew he better not freaking go, right? But he called her out and he said, I felt controlled and manipulated, because we both knew that it wasn't okay for me to go, but you were saying it was. And when we could just calm the thing down, she realized that he just wanted a partner. He just wanted somebody to talk about it. And it got into his deep emotions and how he never got to see his family. It's fabulous. It's like, I didn't give him a script. I just taught it to him and they went to town. I was like, oh, wow, that was amazing.
Wow. That's
So
fantastic.
down the line later in recovery, when he's proven to be a faithful, good dude, she's got to take, a lot of women that are betrayed in the beginning carry a big stick. I have every right to demand everything of you, right? Which is understandable in the beginning. But if we ever want true intimacy, we have to learn to soften up eventually.
We talk so much
good.
about
So
that.
true.
That the wife has, I mean, if it's the wife, that the betrayed has to see growth, and that growth is what produces safety. And it's not just sobriety, it's growth, right? We know that recovery is very different than sobriety. Just because you've abstained from one thing doesn't mean you haven't substituted it for another thing. And so we talk a lot about that. Does he have a group of guys? Is he voicing his emotions more? Is he doing healthy things to process big emotions? Has he taken up new ways of unleashing that energy? Is he taking up new hobbies? Is he being himself? Is he learning how to just have fun again with other people? I mean, there's so many signs of a healthy person, right? And for us, is his walk with the Lord on point? Is he still just checking in and checking out of church, or is he having a quiet time? Is there a relationship there that is noticeable? And so we talk about these things, that these all create safety. And I think I don't know if you'd agree, but that's kind of what a wife has to see for it to start being safe in the relationship.
Sure. And then the aspect of being able to hold space for her. And that's why they need a tool to do it.
Yeah.
Yes, all those components are there, but if I still don't feel connected to you or heard and seen by you, I'm gonna be holding back.
Totally.
So true. I would love to go through validate. I'm so curious. So and I'm sure our audience, they're like, we only got B because that was so good. I want to hear the rest. What is A?
A is ask what else. So that's like, yeah, I'm asking you to go back in for more browbeating. Okay, honey, what else? It is so counterintuitive. But guess what? When a guy said, and I'm saying a guy because that's just the way it usually is, says, what else, honey? She goes, there's always something else. And we all know that, right?
Yep.
But instead of trying to hold it back, we're welcoming it and we're holding space. Okay, tell me more. Okay, tell me more. So I'm going to go through it quick. There's so much I could say, and there's ways to summarize and stop them and things like that when they start. My couple that I did on the webinar said spider webbing. She goes into 1,000 different things. Okay, so bring it back and summarize. I really want to hear you, all that. The next is lean in and listen. And that's all about nonverbal communication and body language. So 93% of the way we communicate is in our body language. I can't tell you the amount of couples that are intimacy avoidant and will not look at each other in the eyes.
Mm-hmm.
It is the saddest thing. And then one of them says something so profound and the other just sits there. And I'm like, connect. Like there's no this on the end. Sometimes I tell a couple, make sure you're nodding, you're, oh, even if you need a minute, just say, hang on, like, let them know you're with them instead of this, like jumping off. It's just like they're dropping off a cliff and they don't say anything. Makes me so sad.
Mm-hmm.
So that's so important. And all your body language can say so much. If you're sitting there with your arms closed, if you're leaning away from, if you don't have eye contact, if you have facial expressions, such a huge deal. The next one is I. And that's indicate that you hear. And that is so simple that people can't do it. And it is simple as repeating back what they just said. And they go, well, that feels so rote. That just feels too like easy, it's just like I'm a parrot. Yeah. But guess what? When you do it, I have never seen anybody go, well, you just parroted what I said. They go, yeah, that's right. And it's so important. It's like, yeah, you heard me. You took the time to listen to me. And so really the I is just saying, oh, so you feel like this. Oh, okay. I heard what you say. Okay. Wow. You're really mad at me for this, or you're mad at her for that. So that's the I, indicating that you hear.
Can I interrupt really quick before you keep going on? I'm going to admit, I am not the best at all of this. And Clinton will be like, did you hear me? And I'll go, yeah, you said blah, 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 blah. I'm really good at repeating. And he goes, okay, but you're not listening. You're doing something else. and it's easy to repeat, but like, what did I really just like say? And then I have to like step away and be like, oh, because I'm a mom of 3 little boys. I have to be a multitasker. It's in my blood, or nothing will get done. And sometimes I just have to remember to really tune in. I like what you're saying is like leaning in and listening. And then you have indicate that you're hearing. Like those two aren't the same. Those two are different, which means I'm repeating, but I'm also showing you with my body language.
Yeah.
I am not just hearing you. I'm listening to you.
Well, that's that eye contact.
So good.
There's no way you can make eye contact and cook dinner and text and be on the computer and look at our kids. Because then I feel like if your eyes are connected, I'm obviously the center of that conversation.
Right. Right. And so she might say, hey, Clinton, can we wait till after dinner?
Yeah.
Or it's important right now. And it's all communication, right?
We talk, yes, absolutely. And then the other thing that she will ask, which is very helpful now, is she'll say, hey, I know you're talking about maybe your quiet time today, or you're telling me what happened with your meeting with your friend. Is this one of those conversations where you need my full attention, or can I do dinner while we talk? And then I'm like, oh yeah, this is a multitask conversation. And then I'm okay with just her hearing me versus active listening all the time. And I think that's what you're saying. Like, it's really good to establish, hey, which one is this? And to have me and to actually be able to say, hey, this is one of those conversations where I'd love your full attention. It can wait. Why don't we do it tonight when the kids are in bed? Or this is one of those things. And so we have to both vocalize, hey, I'm in the middle of this. Can I do both? Or would you like my full attention right now for this conversation?
Exactly. And so when women have triggers, do they want to wait till the convenient moment?
No.
It's in the middle of the night. Wake up. I've got to tell you. And so in early recovery, I mean, that happens.
Yeah.
So it's like, am I going to be fully conscious when I wake up out of a dead sleep? No, I'm probably pissed, and all those things. And so it's about negotiating these things out and talking about 'em. This is so important. I want to hear you, but hold up, I got to wake up. Or could we just wait until the morning? I have an important meeting. And if you're like 2 months into recovery, no, screw your meeting. I mean, that's what they're going to say. Right? As we grow, we want to grow. We don't want to stay in some of these old patterns. So sometimes it's negotiating when the conversation should happen.
Well, I love that. We kind of have a rule. It's not really 10. I don't know why we toast 10, but it's basically nothing before coffee and then nothing after 10 p.m.
Love it.
So, say like 10 or
10, but nothing before 10. It's like 10 to 10, nothing before 10, nothing after 10. Because when we had to implement that, because we realized that I'm a morning person. So I wake up and I'm like, my whole life is in front of my face, and I just need to talk to Charity about it and wake her up in the morning. Or when I'm like the kid sitting at the edge of the bed, like waiting for her to stir. And the minute she moves, I'm like, oh, great, you're awake. Okay, so here's what I was thinking about for today. And it does not work. So she has to have her coffee. She's got to wake up. She's got to analyze what's going on and feel her limbs, and then maybe after an hour or two of that, then we can have a conversation. But
become good students of each other.
Yes. Yes. We have studied each other. He knows me. I know him. And if we want some good conversation, then we do it in our, we've learned each other and when the right time is for that.
And I'm sure you can attest, it's not always easy because I'm a morning person. Charity's not. She's a night owl, and I'm not. I'd be great going to bed at 9:30, 10 o'clock every night and waking up at 5 or 5:30, but I would never see her.
That's right. That's right. So you have to know that about each other. So I think that's fabulous that y'all been able to communicate that and put some ground rules around it. And don't every recovering couple need agreements, fair fighting agreements, and rules about we won't do it in a car. This is what we'll do if one person gets flooded. I mean, I think it's essential to learn how to communicate because we come from different homes where we have different rules for engagement, right?
That's so good, Stacey. Well, keep going, Stacey. I'm sorry we took it off.
Okay.
Keep going.
That's all right. I'm glad you stopped me. The next one's hard. It's don't defend.
Oof.
That's the toughie. Okay. So people don't know what defensiveness is because a lot of people say, well, that's not what I said. Or, well, I love you. And it is defensive because what they're saying is, I don't feel like you do.
Mm.
When you come back with, well, I love you, you're refuting what they're saying instead of saying, oh, you don't feel like I love you. So we have to stay out of judgment. And it's just so hard to do. It is just so hard to do. The typical ones are, when are you going to get over
Yeah.
this? I did it because of this, or, I didn't say it that way. All those goodies. But this is the hardest one. It's not about you.
Mm.
This moment is not
Wow.
about you. It's about them.
I'm guilty of this so much. I defend like crazy. I get out like my I don't even know, like I'm ready to go. I'm ready to fire back pretty much. When he goes and he shares vulnerably, in the beginning of our relationship and even in recovery, I would still even say I'm not 100% amazing at this. I'm growing in it, but I was a defender and I was not a safe person when he would share his
True.
vulnerability with me and I would not validate. And a lot of it was because of my upbringing and communication. I did not learn how to do any of this. And it was what was modeled for me. So when he started saying, like, hey, hello, I like, can we just have a conversation? Can you just validate? I'm like, what's validate? Why do you need that? You're a man, like
Man up.
man up. You don't need a validation. Like, if I'm fine, you're fine. Like, just let's get over it. Let's just go to bed and kiss goodnight, see you later. But it was,
Well, what have you seen about this man now when you validate?
oh my gosh. What, sorry, you cut out in the beginning. What did wh- wh- now that I validate him, how do I see him? um he's more of a man when he shares his feelings than when he medicates them or doesn't share them. It was more so something I had to work on, because I felt like he was great at sharing his feelings, but it made me insecure when he shared his feelings because I couldn't even do it for myself. So it made me uncomfortable. People sharing their emotions and feelings made me uncomfortable. So I had to learn how to even be safe in my own skin, my own self, share my own feelings so that when he shared his feelings, I didn't take it on myself. I just realized, whoa, he's going through a lot. I tried to feel his emotions and then we were able to communicate.
Hmm. Yeah. Intimacy's scary, isn't it?
Oh my
And
goodness.
you know what I was gonna say, Stacey, too? I think, I don't know why this came to my mind when you said that, but I think this is where as Christians, we gotta be very careful because a lot of times someone says something and we can defend them with like a Bible verse.
Oh,
And we can be like, well, God says, and it breaks our heart that, even for Charity and I, for a while, our relationship with Jesus got really, really rocky in recovery. We stopped going to church for about 6 months. I couldn't even listen to worship songs. I just had a hard time with the Lord. And I'm just being vulnerable here, but it was like, I don't really know. I had questions for God. And I think it's because a lot of my life, people didn't know how to validate my feelings. They just threw Bible verses because, like Charity said, maybe they were uncomfortable with their own emotions. Maybe they didn't know how to process it. Maybe it was too scary for them to jump into my emotions and life. Um, and and I just think what you're saying is so important for us to realize that even Jesus feels us first.
yeah.
Even Jesus dives into our pain before he ever tries to correct us. I get it. He doesn't want to leave us there. He doesn't want to abandon us in our brokenness, but he also doesn't just preach at us. He speaks to our heart. And what I hear you saying is when you explain that, I had an image of Christ not just sitting there in the temple waving a Bible or waving the Torah preaching at people, but he actually got in their homes, had a meal with them, sat with them, let the woman cry and pour oil over his feet, let these people, I mean, he was just with them in that emotion before he ever spoke to them. And I just think that is so important for us to realize that as Christians, as long as we're actually making matters worse when we're not validating and we're just teaching and we're just speaking at people with the Bible.
Well, you hit my next biggest project lately is I'm educating pastors.
Hmm.
And the sad part is, and I'm just going to say this out lot right. When I talked at the SILS conference, I'm not really nervous public speaking, but I was because of the pastors, because of my own pain of what my pastors told me, And every single day I hear stories like what you just told me, and it breaks my heart when I hear people being hit over the head with the Bible. So I had this thing going into that SILS conference, and the Lord woke me up at 5:30 that morning, and he said, "You need to forgive every single pastor that has ever wronged you or
Wow.
any one of your clients," which was about 10 jillion. And I did. And I was so prepared to go in there and be fine. But guess what? Not one pastor showed up to hear about how to deal with divorcing partners.
Mm,
They don't want to hear it. So, it's like we're on a mission to help churches understand how to actively listen and how to validate. And I'm partnering with churches that are willing to learn, and it's pretty exciting. So we're hoping that it'll change and turn. But, we're all on the kind of the cutting edge of making that happen these days.
I love that. That's amazing.
We're on the field praying with you and fighting with you and
Yeah,
getting in there. So
Yeah.
absolutely. Okay, so keep
So,
going.
okay. So A is authenticate their view. And this is really, really the crux of validation right here. When you align yourself with your loved one and what they're feeling, it's like you joined with them in the struggle.
Mm,
It's like, oh, that makes so much sense. So if Charity said, you know, gosh, I just want to throw the kids to the wolves today, instead of going, oh my gosh, my precious kids, it's like, oh, I can imagine how you would feel that way after a long day like this, especially when so and so was teething. I don't know. You all of a sudden now you don't feel so alone and someone's kind of sharing the burden with you.
yeah.
And so that's why this piece is so important. It's just so important to come back to that. It's understandable that it would remind you of this. It stands to reason that your mind would go there considering the things I've done. But this is just the biggest part of it. And a lot of times the betrayer wants to forget what they've done and they don't want to be reminded of it. But joining with the one that's been betrayed helps them feel like you're coming back into that place with them and understanding their experience a little bit more. So
Mm.
that's why the A is so very important.
I'll never forget when my first therapist, um, one time we were talking and he just says, "Well, man, your addiction makes perfect sense." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Well, I can see how you would act out. Like it makes sense why you ran to these things. Like to me, I would probably, he validated the fact that he's like, well, of course you'd run to pornography. Of course you'd run to sex. Of course you'd run there because your life is tough."
Yes.
And I was like, what? And he was like, oh yeah. He's like, oh, I get it, man. Like you tell me you went through that childhood trauma, you went through this, you're unaccepted, you're alone, you're isolated, you're just trying to keep up with the people around you. You don't feel like you're enough. You feel stressed out, you're anxious, you're lonely, you're depressed. It just, I can't even blame you for running to medicate your emotions. And I'm like, oh, what? Like everyone's like, oh, you got to stop that, man. That's going to ruin your marriage. It's going to ruin your life. My wife's hurt. She's like, if you ever mess up again, I'm gone. Like everybody else around me was not saying that.
and he
And
wasn't saying continue to do it,
of course
like
not.
justifying it, but he was normalizing
Yes.
the pain and the hurt.
Yes. Like you're not saying, oh yeah, let's go find some wolves and let's put our kids in the back of the van and let's go feed them to the wolves. We're just saying, wow, with how hard of a day that is, it makes complete sense why you'd want to get rid of your kids and ship them off to China.
And
And it's
all of
not that you're going to do that, but you're like, oh,
yeah. And then all of a sudden you go, oh, okay, so I'm not the world's worst person.
yeah,
Oh, okay. That's why I did what I did. Okay. And that leads to self-forgiveness, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah. It makes you feel not alone and crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So good. So good.
So the T, when we go to the T,
Please.
it is tell what you can do. But first you have to ask.
Mm,
So it's like, okay, so what is it you need? What is it you need right now? And the person all the time may not know what they need. That's a hard question. What do you need? A lot of people don't know. They don't know how to take responsibility for what they want and need.
yeah.
But the thing is, you're offering your aid, and so the person may go, "I don't know." And you may say, well, do you want a hug? Do you want to leave? Do you need me to do something? And you may offer some things. And if they say, no, I just don't know, you say, well, get back to me when you know. But if they say, go sell your house and stay home with me all day and never come out of the house again, you still can validate that. Well, it makes sense that that would feel comfortable to you, but maybe can we come up with a solution that doesn't involve going to the poorhouse,
Yeah.
Right. So it's really good to get to that point and be able to say, yes, I can do it, or okay, that makes sense that you would want that. I'm not really there yet,
Mm,
but let me work toward it. Whoops. Let me work toward it.
yeah.
And then to the very last step, which is the big E, empathy. And so it's extend empathy. And what that's about is reaching down inside yourself. And like your counselor saying, okay, if I was in Clinton's shoes and lived his life, what would it feel like? Or maybe there was a time I felt downtrodden. And you don't make it about you. Yeah, there was this time where I did this and this and this. You just touch it within yourself to go, oh yeah, I don't like the way that feels. And I wouldn't want to do that. And I don't want to do that to you. So that's the empathy piece that everybody finds so hard to do. That's pretty
One,
much it.
one thing I heard you say was that I hate that I made you feel that way. And that's so like, I don't know what the word is, but it's just very heavy to be like, I hate that I made you feel that way. You're taking complete responsibility and you're saying that whatever I did, I can't necessarily determine how you interpret it, but the way you interpret it makes me really sad. And that makes me sad because you're sad. And I wish I hadn't done that. And I think it's a great, I don't know, it felt good when you said that in another podcast. I'm like, wow, I really like that. I'm gonna take some good notes. And empathy is really powerful when you say it like that, because I feel completely felt. Even when she says a little story of like, there's a time when this happened to me and I think that's what you're feeling. Is that right? And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm feeling. You feel so heard.
I
Absolutely.
can't take credit for that. That was Mylan and Kay's How We Love.
Yeah. Yeah. And I use that all the time. I facilitate those weekend workshops for intimacy and marriage. And, and I just took a little spin off the comfort circle and
Yeah.
did this a little bit different, just as maybe a shorter thing to do, just a little bit different. We need as many tools as we can get because different tools speak to different people.
Mm.
Yes, it does. This was so good.
Oh my
Like,
goodness.
I took so many notes, and I truly wish we would have known about you and these resources when we were in recovery. And I'm just so grateful. Like, this was absolutely, I feel like it's a magic wand. Like, you do this when you and your spouse are,
The
arguing.
validate process.
Yes, the
Yeah.
validate. And voila.
Yeah.
More to it, and that's why that I'm offering this e-course where you get 8 days of emails for free, and I explain each step in depth, and I
Mm.
caveats to it because there's caveats because we get tripped up and what to do and how to regroup and how to start over and ask for a do-over and how to summarize and all that is in those free 8-day emails.
Well, talk to us, Stacey. How can our guests that are listening to this get plugged in to all that you're doing?
My website has it all on there, www.stacey, Stacey, Sadler.com.
Great.
And all the way down to the bottom, it talks about the free e-course. And all you have to do is enter your name and email address, and you're in the loop to get emails for 8 days. And in the course of those 8 days, I also talk about it at the webinar. In the webinar right now, I'm promoting for $29, half price, because I just want to get this in people's hands because my clients get so frustrated that their husbands can't hold space for them. And so I want to help these guys get it and be able to be empowered to have good relationship, and for the woman, the or the betrayed, to feel like he gets it and is heard, and they just don't know how to do it. They just don't know how to do it. So this webinar is working with a couple. It's a 90-minute webinar with a couple that's in recovery, are struggling through it. They're not doing it easy. They're struggling through it. But in the end, they're like, wow, this was amazing. We really heard each other and we're going to continue to use it. So, yeah. And then I also have, probably beginning at the end of July, I have a 6 week Zoom group with 4 couples. And what happens in that group is they get to watch, and I took this idea from the intimacy and marriage weekends where I facilitate 4 couples or 4 sets of people in there together. And boy, those guys call each other out and those women call each other out. And there is so much growth when you actually work with them as a group, because they're sitting there going, "Whoo, I better watch what I'm saying because I see looks like a fool or she sounds so naggy." And so they all of a sudden go, "I." It's like a mirror, holding up a mirror to them. And so I will work with these couples through the process as we go. So it's a great experience, and I think it just helps couples get to the place they want with intimacy. And all that information is on my website.
Wow. Oh, well, I'm signing up for some stuff. I'm excited.
I know. Oh man, I cannot recommend those tools enough. I mean, those are amazing. The price point obviously so affordable. No excuse why you can't sign up for all of that you're offering.
Yeah, everybody go on Stacey's website right now.
Yeah, right now. Right now. Stacey, thank you so much for being with us. It has been a joy to have you on the Restored to More podcast, and thanks again for all that you're doing.
Thanks for what y'all are doing. And we're all in this boat together trying to help people heal. And it's just great to meet you guys and hear what y'all are doing as well.